RCTP, Beginner to 512, Level 6, 511D to 512, Part 1. Nipple to belly button move.
All right, the nipple belly button dynamic transition. So these moves are notorious for showing up on 512s. This is where your fingers start at about your nipple height, about right here, and you have to move them down to about your belly button height. Now, I'm very fortunate because I noticed that this is what I was struggling with, so I set on my home wall holds that are about this height, and I slowly start to push it down. Normally when you're on a 512 route, it will be very tiny, very horrible holds that you have to do this position and work your way up and pushing into your belly button. So just to demonstrate, my hands start here, I work my way up, and then I have to push it up to about my belly button.
Transition point. A transition point is when you have your hand fairly close to between like your shoulder blades all the way down to about your belly button. Now, getting into a transition point can be very hard, but also getting out of a transition point can be very hard. So here we're watching a climber, and she's going to be moving from like heavily using her shoulder, and then she's going to pull herself closer. And like once you get your hands close, that's when you're starting to work your way into that transition point. So you can see with here that she's pulled herself in close, and so she's now in that full transition point, and then she's reaching up with one hand. Out of all of the climbers that were at this competition, we saw about 8 of them make it into this position, but only 3 of them were actually able to match their hands up on that hold. So just to show you again, like where I'm talking about, that area is about here, and it has to be like once your hands get like close to yourself and suck up to your sides. And so once again, moving out of that transition point and actually matching that hold at the top can be just as hard as getting into that transition point. And I would say on the majority of 12s that I climb indoors, I normally run into this move about once or twice on the route. Dynamic transition, vertical pull to press. Let's watch Matt on this V5. It's the red route, and he's working his way up to a pull to press dynamic transition. So here you see his arms are pretty extended, and now he's going to have to pull and press all the way up and push up and make this move. So that can be one of the hardest moves that I see a lot of people who are starting to work V5s where they're unable to fully pull themselves up and then press themselves down. Dynamic transition, side pull. Similar way, here's about another V5 where we're going to watch somebody do more of like a side pull to a press. And this move again, I see a lot of climbers struggling on, and making it can be fairly difficult. Here's that same move on a V4 problem. So we're going to watch Fab as he goes up, and once he gets a hold of this volume, he's going to have to do a side dynamic transition and pull himself through and be able to reach up and hit the next hold. So this part's pretty easy getting here, but it's this next move of the pull to a press. Egyptian dynamic transition.
In a normal Egyptian pose, we regularly put our toes on top of the hold. Or it also might be the front part of our toes as well. And we slowly start to rotate our foot up as we stand up on top of the climb. In a dynamic transition, this one actually becomes like our Egyptian starts as a push back, and then we slowly start to rotate our weight onto our heel. So we go from pushing back to rotating onto our heel and standing up. And this move can be significantly harder. Now I gave myself really good holds here, but most of the time those holds will also be slopers, and we're palming and we're very gently trying to stand up and rotate our heel.
Climb 2 or more grades above your max. So just to reiterate that point, jump on something that's you think is out of reach and is pretty hard for you. So here's another V7 that Renee did. At this point, again, she has not climbed a V6 yet, and this is her second V7. And she just jumped on it, and she's like, well, maybe I might be able to do it. And she kind of impressed herself because, you know, you can see her struggling and she has to push through pretty hard. But eventually she does make this route and she gets up it. And it's kind of, you know, a little bit of pride in her where she's like, yeah, I haven't done any V6s yet, but you know what? Maybe V7s are just easier than V6s for me. Intimidating committing moves. Sometimes the route will have one signature move in it, which can be fairly intimidating to commit to. So here, Renee is going to have to commit to a very smeary, slabby problem and just jump across and hope that she doesn't smash her face in by missing the hold. But once you get it, you've pretty much solved the problem and then you can go up.